First time I understood that my family would rather silence me than face the truth was the day my byline disappeared. Not edited, not delayed. Gone. The article went live at 6:03 a.m. I refreshed the page 3 times, standing in the hallway outside my apartment, coat already on, coffee growing cold in my hand. The headline was still there. The investigation was intact. But under the title, where my name should have been, there was nothing. No author, no credit, just the publication's logo. If you've ever had your voice erased by people who benefited from it, pause here. Like, comment, or subscribe. Not because this is entertainment, but because stories like this don't end when the screen goes dark. My name is Hannah Pierce. I was 31 years old when my family decided I was a liability. I was an investigative journalist based in St. Louis, Missouri, working for a regional outlet called the Midwestern Ledger. I wasn't famous. I wasn't reckless. I specialized in long-form reporting on local corruption, nonprofit finance, and municipal contracts. Quiet stories. Document-heavy stories. The kind most people skim until they realize it's about them. The article that lost me my name was about a private development deal tied to a charity gala, a charity my family helped run. Growing up, my life revolved around appearances. My mother, Evelyn Pierce, was the executive director of the Pierce Community Foundation, a well-funded nonprofit that hosted annual fundraising events for education and housing initiatives. My father, Robert Pierce, handled donor relations. My younger sister, Claire Pierce, managed social media and outreach. I was the outlier. While they curated optics, I chased paper trails. At family gatherings, they called my work interesting, sometimes dangerous, never important. The tension had always been there, low grade, but constant. At Thanksgiving dinners, my mother would lower her voice and say, "You don't need to dig into everything, Hannah. Some things are better left alone." I'd smile, pass the rolls, change the subject. I didn't argue at home. I reported at work. The story that started everything seemed small at first. A zoning variance approved unusually fast. A donation from a Shell LLC to the Pierce Community Foundation weeks later. Then a gala announcement celebrating a new mixed-use development project downtown. The names overlapped. I flagged it internally. Ran the numbers, pulled public records. The paper trail was clean enough to pass casual scrutiny. That's what made it interesting. When I mentioned the Gala connection to my editor, Marcus Bennett, he paused. "Your family's involved in that nonprofit, right?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "That's why I disclosed it." "Do you want off the story?" he asked. "No," I replied. "I want it handled properly." Marcus studied me. "Bring me documents," he said, "not suspicions." So I did. Emails obtained through FOIA, timelines, donation records, contract approvals signed days before board meetings. Nothing illegal on its face, but ethically gray. I wrote carefully, precisely. No accusations, only facts. Before publication, Marcus sent the piece through legal review. It cleared. The night before it ran, my mother called. "You're writing about the gala," Evelyn Pierce said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I replied. "You didn't think to talk to us first?" she asked. "I requested comment through official channels," I said. There was a pause. "This affects real people," she said. "Our donors, our reputation." "So does the truth," I replied. Her voice hardened. "You've always needed to make things uncomfortable," she said. I didn't answer. The article ran the next morning, and my name vanished with it. By noon, my phone was full. My sister Claire texted first. "Did you really have to do this?" My father called next. "This puts us in a difficult position," Robert Pierce said. "The board is concerned." By mid-afternoon, Marcus called me into his office. He didn't meet my eyes. "We pulled your byline," he said. "Why?" I asked. "Conflict management," he replied. "Temporary." "You didn't tell me," I said. "You didn't need to know," he said. "The story stands." The story stood. I didn't. That evening, my family invited me to dinner. Not to yell, not to threat, to explain. We sat at my parents' dining table, the same one where I'd done homework as a kid while my mother planned galas and my father took donor calls. Evelyn Pierce folded her napkin carefully. "This was irresponsible," she said. "Everything in the article is verified," I replied. "That's not the point," she said. You should have protected us. I protected the facts, I said. Claire crossed her arms. You embarrassed Mom, she said. Robert Pierce leaned forward. You've crossed a line, he said. And now, there are consequences. I looked at him. What consequences? I asked. He didn't answer. The next day, Marcus told me I was being reassigned. No investigations, no political reporting. Lifestyle features. Community events. Soft stories. They're easing pressure, he said. On who? I asked. He sighed. You know who, he said. That night, I opened my laptop and reviewed every document I'd collected, every email, every approval, every donation. I didn't feel angry. I felt focused. Because when people start rearranging your silence, it means they're afraid of what you already know. And I wasn't done looking. The reassignment became official the following Monday. I didn't get a meeting. I got an email from Human Resources, copied to Marcus Bennett. Effective immediately. Your reporting focus will shift to community features and culture coverage. No explanation. No end date. Just a quiet demotion dressed up as balance. I sat at my desk long after the newsroom emptied. The hum of the servers the only sound left. I opened the content management system and scrolled through the stories I'd been pulled from. City contracts, housing authority bids, a nonprofit audit that had just come across my desk. All reassigned. The message was clear. I hadn't broken a rule. I'd broken an arrangement. The next morning, I was sent to cover a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a dog-friendly cafe in South City. The owner was cheerful. The quotes were harmless. The photos were bright. I filed the piece in under an hour. Marcus stopped by my desk afterward. This won't be forever, he said. It never is, I replied. He didn't smile. At home, my family's silence was louder than any argument. My mother, Evelyn Pierce, stopped calling. My father, Robert Pierce, sent a single text about donor concerns, and then nothing. My sister, Claire Pierce, unfollowed me on social media. At first, I told myself it was temporary. Then, the gala happened. The Pierce Community Foundation's annual winter fundraiser had always been a production. This year, it was held at the renovated Grand Union Hall, the same building tied to the development deal I'd written about. I wasn't invited. Instead, I saw it unfold through my sister's posts. Champagne flutes, soft lighting, smiling donors standing beneath banners that read, Building Tomorrow Together. The next morning, the Midwestern Ledger ran a glowing recap, bylined by someone else. My reporting, my sources, my absence. I forwarded the article to Marcus with one line. We need to talk. He asked me to come by after lunch. His office door closed quietly behind me. You knew they'd be sensitive, he said. I knew they'd be scrutinized, I replied. That's different. He rubbed his forehead. The board called, he said. Which board? I asked. He hesitated. The papers, he said. And others. That told me everything. My family didn't need to confront me. They'd outsourced it. Over the next 2 weeks, the pressure tightened in small ways. An editor questioned my expense reports. Another asked me to run quotes by sources before publication, something we never did. My access to public records databases was delayed, not denied, delayed. At a staff meeting, Marcus praised collaborative journalism and sensitivity to community partners. I kept my eyes on my notebook. At home, I started organizing my files. Not because I planned to leave, because I'd learned that preparation is a form of self-respect. That's when I found it. An email chain I'd missed during the chaos. It was from a city clerk named Thomas Avery, responding to a public records request I'd filed weeks earlier. Subject, R.E. Development Variance Documents. He'd attached a supplemental file I hadn't seen before. A PDF. Meeting minutes from a closed session of the zoning committee. I opened it slowly. The names jumped out immediately. Council members, developers, and one unfamiliar line. Advisory support acknowledged from Pierce Community Foundation leadership. I read it twice. Then again, advisory support wasn't illegal. But it wasn't nothing. I cross-checked the date. It was 3 days before my mother's foundation received a 6-figure donation from the same developer. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt steadied. That evening, I went to my parents' house unannounced. The lights were on, the curtains drawn. My mother answered the door, surprised but composed. "Hannah," she said, "you should have called." I emailed. I replied. You didn't respond. She stepped aside. Inside, everything looked the same. Family photos, awards from the foundation, a framed article about Evelyn Pierce's leadership. None of them included me. We sat at the kitchen table. "I'm being sidelined at work," I said calmly. She sighed. "This is what happens when personal and professional lines blur," she said. "You blurred them," I replied. "I disclosed. I followed protocol." She looked at me sharply. "You chose the story over us," she said. "No," I replied. "I chose not to choose." She leaned back. "You don't understand how these things work," she said. "Relationships matter." "So do records," I said. Her expression hardened. "You're risking everything for a technicality," she said. I stood. "This isn't about a technicality," I said. "It's about leverage." She didn't answer. As I reached the door, my father spoke from the living room. "Drop it," Robert Pierce said. "For your own good." I turned to him. "For whose good?" I asked. He didn't reply. That night, I drafted a memo. Not for publication, for myself. I listed dates, names, decisions, donations. I noted every point where pressure appeared instead of answers. The pattern was no longer subtle. 2 days later, Marcus called me into his office again. "There's an opportunity," he said. I waited. "A buyout," he said. "Generous. Quiet." I smiled faintly. "In exchange for?" I asked. He didn't pretend. "Letting this go," he said. I stood. "No," I replied. He watched me carefully. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. I nodded. "Truth usually is," I replied. That evening, an anonymous envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a flash drive and a handwritten note. "You're not wrong. Be careful who you trust." I closed the door behind me and stared at the drive in my palm. Whatever was on it had already crossed a line. And I knew, with a calm certainty, that once I opened it, there would be no going back. I didn't plug the flash drive in right away. That restraint surprised me. A year earlier, I would have opened it the moment I closed the door. Curiosity had always been my engine. But this was different. This wasn't a lead I'd chased. It had found me. Uninvited, I placed the flash drive on my kitchen counter and made dinner. Chopped onions, heated soup. Let my hands do something ordinary, while my mind stayed alert, not frantic. When I finally sat down and opened my laptop, it was after 9 p.m. The building was quiet. The city outside my window had settled into its nightly hush. I inserted the drive. It mounted immediately. No password, no theatrics. Just a folder labeled Zoning Support. Inside were scanned emails, PDFs, and a spreadsheet. I opened the emails first. They were correspondence between my mother, Evelyn Pierce, and a city council aide named Margaret Holloway. The tone was friendly, familiar, not improper at first glance, until the dates lined up. Evelyn Pierce offering background context ahead of zoning meetings. Margaret Holloway responding with meeting times, committee sentiments, and suggested framing language, not instructions, guidance. Then, the spreadsheet. It listed donors, amounts, dates. 6 entries stood out, each one connected to developers involved in projects requiring variances. Each donation made within days of advisory exchanges. I leaned back in my chair, not breathing for a moment. This wasn't a smoking gun. It was worse. It was plausible deniability, built on repetition. At the bottom of the folder was a scanned letter on city letterhead. A formal thank you addressed to Evelyn Pierce for her ongoing civic engagement and support, signed by a council member. I closed the laptop. This wasn't something I could hand to my editor quietly. Not anymore. The ledger had already chosen its side, even if it wouldn't admit it. I needed distance and protection. The next morning, I called a name I hadn't spoken aloud in years. Daniel Ross. He answered on the second ring. "Hannah Pierce," he said. "I was wondering when you'd call." Daniel Ross was a media attorney based in Chicago. We'd met years earlier when I was a junior reporter covering a defamation suit. He was careful, precise, and allergic to drama. "I need legal advice," I said. "Not representation. Yet." He didn't ask for details. "Tell me what you have," he said. I did. Slowly. Exactly. When I finished, there was a pause. "You understand what this is?" he said. "Yes," I replied. "You also understand who this involves," he said. "Yes. And you understand that once you move, You won't control how far it goes, he said. Yes, I said, again. He exhaled. Then here's my advice, he said. Do nothing publicly. Secure copies, preserve metadata, and do not, under any circumstances, alert your employer or your family to what you have. I wasn't planning to, I said. Good, he replied. Because they're already moving. How do you know? I asked. Because when organizations feel exposed, they don't argue facts, he said. They manage people. That afternoon, Marcus Bennett sent a calendar invite. Subject: Performance Alignment Check-in. I didn't accept it. I forwarded it to Daniel Ross instead. He replied with one sentence: Decline. Create a record. I responded to Marcus with a brief email. I'm unavailable. Please send concerns in writing. He didn't reply. At home that evening, my sister Claire Pierce called. I almost didn't answer, but I did. You're tearing everything apart, she said immediately. Hello to you too, I replied. You know what Mom's dealing with right now, she said. Donors are nervous. People are talking. About what? I asked. She hesitated. That you can't separate work from family, she said. I smiled faintly. That's interesting, I said, because I disclosed the conflict. They didn't. Stop, she said. You're always doing that, turning everything into an argument. I'm turning it into a record, I replied. Her voice sharpened. You think you're smarter than everyone else, she said. No, I said. I think I'm paying attention. She hung up. 2 days later, the Midwestern Ledger announced a new internal policy. All investigative pitches required pre-approval by the managing editor and legal counsel. Retroactive. That same afternoon, Marcus called me into his office again. This time, the door stayed open. We're concerned about your judgment, he said. Be specific, I replied. You've created reputational risk, he said. For whom? I asked. He didn't answer. We're placing you on administrative leave, he said. Paid. Temporary. I nodded. Send it in writing, I said. He looked relieved, as if he'd been waiting for me to make it easy. The leave notice arrived an hour later. No mention of cause, no mention of duration, just language about review and recalibration. At home that night, I backed everything up. Multiple drives, encrypted storage, a secure cloud account under a name not tied to my own. I didn't feel paranoid. I felt methodical. On Friday morning, I received a message from an unknown number. It was short. They're trying to bury this. Don't let them. No name, no explanation. An hour later, another message arrived. Same number. Check the foundation's tax filings from 3 years ago. Schedule B. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I knew exactly where to look. By the time I opened the filings, the pattern was undeniable. Donor anonymity, timing, influence. Still not illegal, but unmistakably coordinated. That afternoon, Daniel Ross called me back. You're past the point of quiet now, he said. I know, I replied. Good, he said. Because the next move isn't about exposing them. What is it about? I asked. Protecting yourself, he said. Before they decide you're expendable. I stared out my window at the city I'd reported on for nearly a decade. I already am, I said. Yes, he replied. Which means you have leverage you haven't used yet. I closed my eyes. What do I do? I asked. You stop trying to survive their system, he said, and you start building your own. That night, my mother left a voicemail. We need to fix this, Evelyn Pierce said, before it goes too far. I saved it, not to listen again, but to remember the moment she realized control was slipping. I stood in my kitchen, phone in one hand, flash drive in the other, and felt something settle into place. The small story had ended. The big one was about to begin. And this time, I wouldn't be asking for permission to tell it. Administrative leave felt less like rest and more like exile. My access badge stopped working that Monday morning. My work email auto-forwarded to a generic HR inbox. The newsroom Slack removed my name without explanation. I wasn't fired. I was erased. I spent the first day doing nothing, on purpose. No research, no outlining, no planning. I cleaned my apartment, did laundry, took a long walk through Tower Grove Park, and watched people who had no idea who I was or what I was losing. It steadied me. On the second day, I went to the St. Louis County Recorder of Deeds office, not because of the messages, because I trusted patterns more than warnings. I pulled property records connected to the same developers listed in the spreadsheet from the flash drive. I cross-referenced shell companies, looked for repeat attorneys, shared mailing addresses. By noon, I had 3 new threads. One name kept appearing in the filings: Victor Hale. He was a real estate attorney who specialized in nonprofit partnerships and development incentives. His firm had represented the Pierce Community Foundation more than once. That alone wasn't notable, until I found his wife's name: Margaret Holloway Hale, City Council aide. I sat back in my chair and let the information settle. This wasn't sloppy. It was intimate. At 2 p.m., my father, Robert Pierce, called. I let it ring. He called again, an hour later. Then he texted, "We need to handle this privately." I didn't respond. At 4:30, Daniel Ross called me. "I saw the leave notice," he said. "That's faster than I expected." "They're containing," I replied. "Yes," he said, "which means they're nervous." "I found something," I said. "A connection they didn't hide well enough." I told him about Victor Hale and Margaret Holloway Hale. There was a pause. "That's significant," he said. "Not criminal, but explosive." "That seems to be the theme," I replied. He exhaled. "Here's what I want you to do," he said. "Write everything as if you're going to publish. Not tomorrow, not here, but clean, sourced, unassailable." "I already am," I said. "I know," he replied. "But now you write knowing they will come after you personally." That night, my sister Claire Pierce showed up at my apartment. She didn't knock. She rang the bell twice, sharp and impatient. When I opened the door, she looked smaller than I remembered. Not weaker, just stripped of confidence. "You didn't answer, Mom," she said. "I'm not obligated to," I replied. She stepped inside, anyway. "You're being put on leave," she said. "That's serious." "It's strategic," I said. "You're risking your career," she said. I met her eyes. "My career was already risked," I said, "by people who wanted silence." She crossed her arms. "You think you're some martyr," she said. "No," I replied. "I think I'm inconvenient." Her jaw tightened. "You could have done this differently," she said. "How?" I asked. "By pretending I didn't see it?" She didn't answer. Instead, she said quietly, "Mom is scared." "That's new," I said. "She built something," Claire snapped. "And you're tearing it down." "I didn't build the structure," I said. "I just mapped it." She looked at me for a long moment, then shook her head. "You always choose work over people," she said. I didn't raise my voice. "I choose truth over comfort," I replied. "There's a difference." She left without saying goodbye. The next morning, an email arrived from the Ledger's legal department. Subject: Reminder of confidentiality obligations. It listed clauses from my employment contract. Non-disparagement. Internal review cooperation. Media silence. I forwarded it to Daniel Ross. His reply came quickly. "They're laying groundwork. Do not respond." By Thursday, rumors reached me through friends still at the paper. The board was discussing a permanent separation. Quiet, respectful, mutually agreed. They wanted me gone, without noise. That was when the first call from outside the city came. A reporter named Elaine Foster from the Chicago Tribune. She left a voicemail. "Hannah, I'm looking into nonprofit influence in Midwest development deals. Your name came up. If you're willing to talk off the record, I'd appreciate it." I didn't call her back. Not yet. That evening, I received an email from a private address. It wasn't anonymous this time. It was from Victor Hale. "Hannah Pierce, I understand you've been asking questions about matters involving my firm and the Pierce Community Foundation. I'd appreciate the opportunity to clarify misunderstandings before things escalate unnecessarily." Clarify. That word again. I showed the email to Daniel Ross. "Do not reply," he said, "but save it. He wouldn't reach out unless he knew you were close." I sat at my desk long after midnight. Documents spread around me, timelines pinned to the wall with sticky notes. The story was no longer just about my family. It was about a system that expected silence from people it benefited from. And I had reached the point where stepping back was no longer possible. I wasn't on leave anymore. I was in position. And the next move wouldn't belong to them. Friday morning arrived without ceremony. No calls, no emails, no new warnings. That silence told me more than noise ever could. I started the day early, reviewing everything I had assembled so far. Not to add, to subtract. Weak connections, assumptions that felt neat but couldn't survive scrutiny. I stripped the story down to what could be proven without interpretation. Facts don't need momentum. They need space. At 9:12 a.m., Daniel Ross called. They're preparing a separation agreement, he said. Your editor asked HR for language templates. Do I respond? I asked. Not yet, he replied. But you should decide what you want. I want my work back, I said. There was a pause. You're not getting it there, he said gently. I know, I replied. I want the work itself, not the desk. He understood. Then it's time to choose a platform, he said. I didn't answer immediately, because that part terrified me more than legal threats. Independence sounds brave until you realize it means no buffer, no institutional shield, no one else to blame if things go wrong. But it also meant no one else could take my name off the page. That afternoon, I went to the public library downtown. Not for research, for quiet. I sat at a long table and outlined the story as if I were pitching it to someone else. Clear angle, verifiable claims, human impact without theatrics. The core wasn't corruption, it was access. Who gets it? Who trades it? Who pretends it doesn't matter? When I finished, I counted the pages. 87. That was too much. I cut it in half. By the time I left the library, my phone had 6 missed calls, all from my mother. I didn't listen to the voicemails. Instead, I drove to my parents' house. Not to argue, to observe. Evelyn Pierce opened the door with practiced composure. She looked tired, not frail, calculating. You shouldn't be here, she said. I won't stay long, I replied. Inside, the house hummed with activity. Phones charging, papers spread across the dining table. Claire's laptop open, Foundation emails scrolling. They were managing fallout. Robert Pierce stood near the window, arms crossed. You're putting everyone in danger, he said without turning around. From what? I asked. From misunderstanding, he said. I looked at my mother. Do you deny advising city staff ahead of zoning decisions? I asked. She inhaled sharply. We provided context, she said. That's normal. Do you deny accepting donations from developers within days of those conversations? I asked. That's how fundraising works, she replied. Do you deny coordinating through a council aide married to your foundation's attorney? I asked. Silence. Claire looked up sharply. What are you talking about? She asked. Evelyn Pierce didn't answer her. Instead, she looked at me. You're framing this unfairly, she said. I'm framing it accurately, I replied. Robert turned toward me. You will destroy everything we've built, he said. No, I replied calmly. You built it this way. My mother's voice dropped. You think you're immune because you're a journalist, she said. You're not. I know, I replied. That's why I'm careful. Claire stood. You could still stop, she said, before it's too late. I met her gaze. For who? I asked. No one answered. I left without saying goodbye. That evening, Daniel Ross called again. They're worried, he said. About what? I asked. About where this lands, he said. Not whether it's true. I expected that, I replied. There's interest, he continued, from outside Missouri. Who? I asked. Elaine Foster wasn't fishing, he said. Neither was the nonprofit watchdog group that contacted me this morning. That got my attention. What did they want? I asked. To know if you'd consider releasing this through a partnership, he said. Independent publication, legal backing, shared risk. I closed my eyes. That was the door. It wasn't safe. But it was clean. I need time, I said. Take the night, he replied. But understand something. What? I asked. Once this is out, he said, your family won't be able to manage it away. And they will blame you for that. I nodded. They already do, I said. After the call, I opened my laptop and drafted a resignation letter. Not to send, just to see if I could. I didn't write about betrayal or principle. I wrote about alignment, about professional integrity, about choosing not to remain where trust had eroded beyond repair. I saved it. Then I opened a new document. Title, Advisory Silence. Byline, Hannah Pierce. Seeing my name there felt heavier than victory. It felt like responsibility. At midnight, a text came in from an unknown number. Last chance. Let this go. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I deleted it. Because by the time someone offers you an exit, it means they're afraid of what happens if you stay. And I wasn't staying quiet anymore. The next chapter wouldn't be about what they could take from me. It would be about what I chose to release, and who would finally be forced to listen. I didn't sleep much that night. Not from fear, from calibration. Every few minutes, my mind returned to the same question. Not whether to publish, but how. The difference mattered. Truth without structure turns into noise. Structure without truth becomes performance. I needed both. At 6:40 a.m., I emailed Daniel Ross. I'm ready. Tell me who to talk to. His reply came 8 minutes later. I'm looping in Elaine Foster in the Midwest Accountability Network. Secure call at 10. By 7:15, my parents' foundation posted a cheerful update on social media. Photos from the gala, smiling faces, a caption about community trust. I took screenshots. At 9:50, I poured coffee and opened a clean notebook. I wrote down 3 non-negotiables. No speculation, no family commentary, no personal framing. This story would stand without me asking anyone to feel sorry for me. At 10 o'clock sharp, the call began. Elaine Foster introduced herself first. Her voice was steady, practiced. Thank you for agreeing to speak, she said. I know this isn't easy. It's necessary, I replied. She didn't push. Daniel Ross laid out boundaries. Off the record until we agreed otherwise. No documents forwarded without encryption. No publication timeline until legal review. The representative from the Midwest Accountability Network, a man named Samuel Ortiz, spoke last. We don't publish for impact, he said. We publish for record. That was the sentence that convinced me. Over the next 2 hours, I walked them through everything. Not chronologically, logically. How advisory language functioned. How donation timing created influence without fingerprints. How access moved quietly through relationships instead of memos. Elaine asked precise questions. Samuel asked structural ones. No one asked how it felt. At the end of the call, Elaine spoke again. This will take time, she said. Verification, right of reply, independent confirmation. I expect that, I replied. And you understand, she continued, that your family will be contacted. Yes, I said. Are you prepared for that? She asked. I've been prepared for a while, I replied. The call ended. At noon, my editor Marcus Bennett emailed me again. Subject, checking in. 1 sentence. Hope you're doing well. Let me know when you're ready to talk. I archived it. At 1:30 p.m., I received a calendar invite from HR. Exit discussion, scheduled for Friday. I forwarded it to Daniel Ross. His reply was immediate. Do not attend until publication plan is locked. That afternoon, my sister Claire Pierce called again. This time, I answered. You're going to ruin Mom, she said, skipping hello. I'm not writing about Mom, I replied. You know that's not true, she snapped. I'm writing about systems, I said. If she's part of one, that's not my doing. Claire exhaled sharply. She built something good, she said. She built something protected, I replied. There was a long pause. You don't understand what it takes to keep things running, she said quietly. I understand exactly what it takes, I replied. That's why I'm here. Her voice dropped. You were always so serious, she said, so rigid. I didn't react. I was observant, I said. You just didn't like where I looked. She hung up without another word. That evening, I received a formal letter via courier from Victor Hale's firm. Cease and desist. It alleged defamation, improper acquisition of materials, intent to cause reputational harm. Daniel Ross laughed when he read it. They're early, he said. That's a mistake. Why? I asked. Because it confirms awareness, he said, and panic. At 8 p.m., Elaine emailed me. We have confirmation from 2 independent sources. We're moving forward. No celebration followed, just quiet resolve. The next morning, my mother left a voicemail. Hannah, Evelyn Pierce said, voice controlled but strained. We can still manage this internally. Please call me. I saved it, not to replay, to mark the moment. Friday came quickly. I did not attend the exit meeting. Instead, I went for a walk along the river and watched the water move without concern for optics. At 11:07 a.m., Elaine texted, right of reply sent. They have 48 hours. At 11:12, my father called. I didn't answer. At 11:18, Claire texted, what did you do? At 11:22, an email arrived from the Pierce Community Foundation's board. Subject, clarification request. They wanted a meeting. Not with me. With counsel. Daniel Ross replied on my behalf. All inquiries should be directed to Publication Counsel. The silence that followed was heavy. Not empty. Heavy. That night, I sat at my desk and read my draft again. I removed 3 adjectives. I tightened 2 paragraphs. I replaced 1 metaphor with a number. When I finished, I felt no adrenaline, only certainty. Because this wasn't revenge. It was release. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I was refusing to disappear quietly for their convenience. At 10:34 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. This isn't how families solve problems. I typed back 1 line. Families don't solve problems by erasing people. Then I turned the phone off. The story was no longer in my hands, which meant, finally, that I was free to stand by it. And when the first sentence reached the public, it would do what silence never could. It would make denial impossible. The waiting was almost over. The waiting changed everything. Not because time softened the edges, but because it revealed who believed silence would still protect them. Saturday morning arrived with an unnatural stillness. No calls, no messages, no threats disguised as concern. The kind of quiet that isn't peace, but calculation. I made breakfast, cleaned the kitchen, read through a public records request I'd filed months ago that had finally been fulfilled overnight. It contained nothing new. That alone told me something. They were done pretending transparency mattered. At 10:06 a.m., Daniel Ross emailed. They've retained crisis counsel. At 10:11, Elaine Foster followed. 2 responses received, both vague. No denials, no explanations. I didn't ask which responses. I already knew. My mother's voicemail arrived at noon. Hannah, Evelyn Pierce said, and her voice was different now. Not controlled, not polished. Thin. This has gone far enough. I didn't delete it. I didn't save it either. I let it sit where it landed. That afternoon, I drove past the Foundation's downtown office without stopping. The building looked the same as it always had. Clean glass, branded signage, a banner advertising community impact. What changed was how I saw it. It wasn't a home. It was a stage, and the audience was finally paying attention. At 3:30 p.m., my phone rang again. Daniel Ross. They're floating a settlement, he said. For what? I asked. For you, he replied. Severance from the ledger, non-disclosure, mutual non-disparagement. From whom? I asked. He paused. Indirectly, he said. Your parents' counsel reached out to the papers. I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. They still think this is about me, I said. Yes, he replied. That's their blind spot. What did you tell them? I asked. That we don't negotiate facts, he said. Good answer. At 5 p.m., Claire Pierce showed up again. This time, she knocked. When I opened the door, she didn't look angry. She looked cornered. They're calling an emergency board meeting, she said. Tonight. I know, I replied. Her eyes widened. How? She asked. I read agendas, I said. She stepped inside slowly, as if unsure she was welcome. They want to suspend Mom, she said. Just temporarily. For optics, I replied. She nodded. They're blaming legal exposure, she said. They say it's about protecting the mission. And you? I asked. She looked down. They asked me to distance the Foundation publicly, she said. That's smart, I replied. Her head snapped up. You're not even angry, she said. I passed that stage, I replied. She swallowed. They want you to make a statement, she said. Saying this is exaggerated. No, I replied. They're afraid of donors, she said. I know, I replied. They think if you say it was misunderstood, it will all calm down, she said. I met her eyes. And what do you think? I asked. She hesitated. I think, she said slowly, that they never thought you'd refuse to play along. I nodded. That's the story, I said. She sat down heavily on the couch. They're not monsters, she said quietly. I didn't say they were, I replied. They just didn't expect consequences, she said. Neither did I replied. Until now. She stayed for another 10 minutes. We didn't argue. We didn't reconcile. We talked about logistics, about how she'd handle press inquiries, about what not to say. When she left, she paused at the door. You know this changes everything, she said. Yes, I replied. That's why I didn't stop. At 8:47 p.m., Elaine texted. Publication scheduled Monday morning. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Monday. That gave them one more day. One more night. One more chance to panic quietly. At 9:15, an email arrived from Marcus Bennett. Subject: "We need to talk." No greeting, no warmth, just urgency. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and reread the final draft Elaine had sent me for fact check. Everything was clean, sourced, measured. My name appeared once in the disclosure section. That was intentional. This wasn't a memoir. It was a map. I closed the document and shut the laptop. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I slept. Sunday passed slowly. My phone stayed mostly silent. At 6:22 p.m., Daniel Ross sent one last message. "Tomorrow won't feel like victory. Don't expect relief. Expect clarity." That night, I stood on my balcony and watched the city lights come on, one by one. Somewhere, people were rehearsing statements, drafting apologies, preparing to look surprised. I wasn't rehearsing anything. I'd already said what mattered. Monday morning would take care of the rest. And for the first time since my byline vanished, I wasn't waiting to be heard. I was waiting for the truth to arrive on its own terms. Monday didn't announce itself. No breaking news alerts, no early morning calls. Just a quiet email from Elaine Foster at 6:01 a.m. "It's live." I opened the link without ceremony. The headline was plain, precise, almost understated. It didn't mention my family. It didn't mention me. It described a pattern of advisory access between nonprofit leadership and municipal decision-making across multiple Midwestern cities, anchored by documented timelines, financial disclosures, and correspondence. My mother's name appeared halfway down once. In context, no adjectives, no drama. By 6:17 a.m., my phone began vibrating on the table. Not ringing, vibrating. I didn't answer any of them. I made coffee, sat by the window, watched the street fill slowly with people heading to work, unaware that reputations were already shifting. At 7:04 a.m., Daniel Ross called. "They're reacting," he said. "Who?" I asked. "Everyone," he replied. The foundation's board issued a holding statement. The city announced a review. Your paper just published a follow-up. I opened the Midwestern Ledger's site. There it was, a secondary piece, bylined by Marcus Bennett, referencing the investigation, quoting the Tribune, citing independent reporting. No mention of me. I felt nothing. At 8:15, Claire Pierce texted. "They suspended Mom." I didn't reply. At 8:32, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. "Hannah," Robert Pierce said, his voice hoarse. "This has gone too far. We need to talk. As a family." I deleted it. Not in anger, in finality. At 9 a.m., my email filled with media inquiries, requests for comment, invitations to panels, offers from nonprofit watchdog groups asking if I'd consult. Daniel filtered them. At 9:40, he sent me one message. "The Ledger terminated your contract. Effective immediately. Severance offered." I exhaled slowly. Not relief. Release. At 10:10, Elaine texted again. Second City announced review. Third nonprofit issued statement distancing leadership. This wasn't collapse. It was separation. At noon, I walked outside and let the sunlight hit my face. People were on lunch breaks, talking, laughing. Nothing looked different, but it was. At 1:15 p.m., an email arrived from Victor Hale's firm. "We retract our previous correspondence." No apology, no explanation. At 2 p.m., my mother emailed. Subject: "Please." I didn't open it. At 3:20, the Midwest Accountability Network published their analysis. They didn't accuse. They recommended reforms, disclosure changes, cooling off periods, board oversight. It was the kind of response that lingers. That evening, I met Daniel Ross in person, for the first time since this began. We sat in a quiet restaurant. No laptops, no documents. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Tired, but aligned." He nodded. "You did something rare," he said. "You didn't center yourself." "I couldn't," I replied. "That would have made it dismissible." He smiled slightly. "Exactly," he said. On the walk home, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. "You've humiliated your own family." I stopped walking, typed one reply. They humiliated themselves by assuming I'd stay silent. Then I blocked the number. That night, I sat at my desk and opened a new document. Not an article. A proposal. Independent investigative work. Collaborative model. legal firewall. I wasn't unemployed. I was unclaimed. And that distinction mattered. Before bed, I finally opened my mother's email. It was long, emotional, defensive. She wrote about intentions, about sacrifice, about how hard she'd worked. She didn't mention the article. She didn't mention the evidence. I closed the message without replying. Some conversations only exist to restore control. They don't deserve an answer. I went to sleep knowing something irreversible had happened. Not to my family. To me. I was no longer waiting to be included. I was deciding where my work would exist. And that freedom, earned slowly and at great cost, was something no one could take away. The next phase wouldn't be about exposure. It would be about construction. And I was ready to begin. The aftermath didn't explode. It reorganized. By Tuesday morning, the language around the story had shifted from shock to process. Reviews, audits, independent assessments. The kind of words institutions use when they realize denial would only make things worse. I watched it happen from a distance, not hiding. Not engaging. Observing. At 8:22 a.m., Daniel Ross forwarded a memo from the city ethics office announcing a formal inquiry into advisory communications tied to zoning approvals over the past 5 years. It named no individuals. It didn't need to. At 9:10, the Pierce Community Foundation's website went dark. When it returned an hour later, the leadership page had been edited. My mother, Evelyn Pierce, was no longer listed. At 10:05, my sister Claire Pierce emailed me. I'm stepping down. No explanation. No accusation, just a fact. I stared at the message longer than I expected. Not because it hurt, because it clarified something I'd avoided admitting. This wasn't just about my mother. It never had been. It was about an ecosystem that rewarded silence and punished precision. My family hadn't created it. They'd learned to survive inside it. And when I stopped playing my part, the system did what systems do. It corrected. At 11:30, I met Elaine Foster for coffee. No recorders, no notes, just two professionals decompressing after a long sprint. "You okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Different." She nodded. "That doesn't go away," she said, "but it gets quieter." I believed her. She slid a folder across the table. "3 outlets want to partner with you," she said. "Long-term, investigative units. They're asking about availability." "Independence?" I asked. "Non-negotiable," she said. "They know that now." I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I asked a different question. "Who pushed back the hardest?" I asked. Elaine smiled faintly. "Your paper," she said. "They're insisting they had no idea." I laughed once. "They always say that," I replied. At 1 p.m., Daniel called. "They're requesting mediation," he said. "Who?" I asked. "Your parents," he replied. "Through counsel." "No," I said. He didn't argue. "That's clean," he said. At 2:45, a nonprofit board member I didn't recognize emailed me. "We failed you. We won't say that publicly, but I needed you to hear it." I replied with one line: "Do better next time." That afternoon, I walked through Forest Park without my phone. The air was warm. The paths were crowded with people who didn't know my name and didn't need to. That anonymity felt earned. When I got home, I sat at my desk and opened the proposal I'd started the night before. I refined it, tightened the language, clarified boundaries. I named it Clear Margin. A collaborative investigative project focused on local power structures, transparent funding, independent legal review, shared credit, no silent erasures. At 6:10 p.m., my phone buzzed again. "Unknown number. You could have handled this privately." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a blank page and wrote a paragraph that would become my operating principle. Privacy is not the same as accountability. Silence protects those already insulated. Transparency protects the record. That night, I received a final message from Marcus Bennett. Subject: regret. It was short. I should have handled this differently. I believed him. That didn't change anything. Before bed, I checked my inbox one last time. Dozens of messages. Support, anger, requests, projections. I ignored most of them. Then I saw one from a woman I didn't know. "I read your work. I'm scared to publish what I found. But now, I think I might try." I stared at the screen. Then I replied, "Be careful. Be precise. Don't wait for permission. I turned off the light and lay in the dark, listening to the city settle. If this story has followed you this far, if you've ever been pushed aside for asking the wrong questions, or told to soften the truth to keep the peace, pause here. Like the video. Leave a comment if you recognize the pattern. Subscribe if you want stories about accountability that doesn't ask for applause. Because the real shift doesn't happen when the story breaks. It happens when someone else decides to stop being quiet. Tomorrow wouldn't be quieter, but it would be mine. And that was enough. The momentum didn't slow after the story broke. It narrowed. By midweek, the noise had separated into two distinct streams. Public outrage on one side, institutional recalibration on the other. The first was loud but fleeting. The second was quiet, procedural, and far more dangerous to the people who had relied on invisibility. I paid attention to the second. At 8:30 a.m. on Wednesday, Daniel Ross forwarded a notice from the Missouri Ethics Commission. They were opening a preliminary review into nonprofit advisory conduct connected to zoning variances. No accusations, no targets, just scope. That word mattered. Scope is how systems decide who gets pulled in. At 9:15, Elaine Foster texted me. We're getting calls from 2 other cities. Similar patterns, different names. I wasn't surprised. Systems repeat because they're taught to. At 10 o'clock, I sat down at my desk and finalized the clear margin proposal. I removed anything aspirational. Left only structure, funding transparency, editorial independence, legal firewall. A rotating advisory board with no voting power. No one would confuse this for a personal platform. That was the point. At noon, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. Hannah Pierce, a man said when I answered. His voice was measured, professional. This is Judge Alan Reeve. I straightened instinctively. Judge Reeve was a retired federal judge known for overseeing complex ethics cases. He now chaired an independent oversight panel for nonprofit governance. I read the Tribune piece, he continued, and the network's analysis. Yes, I said carefully. I won't comment on the substance, he said, but I wanted you to hear something directly. I waited. When people tell the truth without theatrics, institutions listen longer, he said. You did that. Thank you, I replied. There will be pressure, he added, to make you the story. Resist that. I intend to, I said. He paused. If you move forward with your independent work, he said, do it slowly. Precision outlasts urgency. Then he hung up. I sat there for a moment, letting the call settle. Not pride, permission. That afternoon, my parents' attorney emailed Daniel. Subject: proposal for resolution. Daniel forwarded it to me without commentary. I read it once. They wanted mediation, confidentiality, mutual non-disparagement, a statement expressing regret for misunderstanding. No acknowledgement of facts. I didn't respond. Daniel replied on my behalf. We decline. At 3:45, Claire Pierce texted again. I'm moving out of state. I typed a reply. Deleted it. Typed again. I wish you clarity. She responded a minute later. You always did. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't need to. That evening, I met with 2 journalists Elaine had connected me with, a woman from Minneapolis, a man from Columbus. Both had left legacy outlets after conflicts that sounded uncomfortably familiar. We didn't trade war stories. We talked about process, about shared legal resources, about how to protect freelancers from retaliation, about credit. Especially credit. By the time I got home, it was dark. I stood in my kitchen, the quiet no longer heavy, just neutral. I checked my phone one last time before setting it down for the night. An email from my mother. Subject: I don't recognize you anymore. I didn't open it. Not because it would hurt. Because it would pull me backward into a conversation frame to restore her footing, not to address harm. I went to bed early. Thursday arrived with rain. The kind that cleans without asking permission. At 7:30 a.m., I received confirmation that Clear Margin had secured its first fiscal sponsor, a small journalism nonprofit based in Illinois. No branding requirements, No editorial input, just accountability. At 9 o'clock, the Ledger announced a new internal review policy regarding conflicts of interest. They cited industry standards. They did not cite the story. That omission said more than acknowledgement would have. At 11:20, a local radio station requested an interview. Daniel declined politely. At 1 o'clock, Elaine forwarded me a message from a source who had initially been too afraid to speak. I'm ready now. I can document everything. I closed my eyes briefly. This was the real shift, not consequences. Continuation. That afternoon, I walked downtown again. Past the foundation office, past City Hall, past the coffee shop where I'd once edited copy on my phone between interviews. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt accurate. In the early evening, Daniel called one last time for the day. You're doing well, he said. But I need to say something. What? I asked. They're going to try to rehabilitate themselves, he said. Public apologies, governance changes, new faces. I expect that, I replied. When they do, he continued, they'll imply you forced their hand, that you overreacted. I know, I said. And you're okay with that? He asked. Yes, I said. Because reform that requires discomfort was overdue anyway. He chuckled softly. You're harder to manipulate than they expected, he said. They raised me, I replied. They just didn't realize what they were teaching. After we hung up, I sat down and wrote a single sentence at the top of my notebook. I don't need vindication to know I was right. The chapter was closing, not with reconciliation, with direction. Tomorrow would bring more fallout, more calls, more narratives I didn't control. But tonight, for the first time since my byline vanished, I felt settled. Not because I'd won, because I'd stopped negotiating with people who only listened when they were losing. And that choice, once made, didn't need to be defended. By Friday, the city had adjusted. Not healed, adjusted. Headlines rotated out. Commentators found new angles. People who had spoken loudly early on began to soften their language, replacing certainty with phrases like evolving situation and ongoing review. That shift told me more than outrage ever could. Outrage burns fast. Process reshapes quietly. I spent the morning reviewing documents with Samuel Ortiz from the Midwest Accountability Network. We weren't looking for new revelations. We were stress testing what was already public. What happens next, he said, tapping a page with his pen, isn't exposure. It's normalization. Meaning? I asked. They'll adopt policies, he said. They'll thank reviewers. They'll say lessons were learned. And then they'll wait for attention to move on. And will it? I asked. He met my eyes. That depends on whether anyone keeps records, he said. At noon, I received confirmation that the City Council aide, Margaret Holloway Hale, had been placed on administrative leave pending review. The announcement was 2 sentences long. No names beyond hers, no reference to the foundation. Contained. My mother still hadn't reached out directly again. Instead, I heard about her through others. A former donor emailed me privately, expressing disappointment, but stopping short of condemnation. A board member released a statement praising her years of service while acknowledging the need for change. Language designed to preserve dignity while conceding ground. I recognized it. I'd grown up inside that tone. In the afternoon, Daniel Ross and I met via video to discuss next steps. Not legal, strategic. You're entering a phase where people will try to redefine your role, he said. From journalist to activist, from observer to instigator. I know, I replied. Your instinct will be to correct them, he said. Don't. I won't, I said. I'll publish. He nodded. That's how you stay credible, he said. After the call, I walked to a small coffee shop near my apartment. The barista recognized me but didn't say anything, just handed me my drink and nodded once. That felt right. I sat by the window and watched pedestrians hurry past, their lives moving on in directions unrelated to mine. It grounded me, reminded me that even the most consuming stories are only central to those living inside them. My phone buzzed. A text from Claire. I'm in Denver. I start a new job Monday. I stared at the message longer than I expected. Then I typed back, I hope it gives you space. She replied a minute later, me too. That was it. No blame, no repair, No pretending we understood each other better than we did. Sometimes distance is the most honest outcome. That evening, I received a final email from the Pierce Community Foundation. Subject: Notice of Transition. They announced interim leadership, an external audit, a commitment to transparency. No mention of me. I read it once, then archived it. I wasn't waiting to be acknowledged. That night, I worked on clear margin. Not branding, not outreach, infrastructure. I finalized contributor agreements that protected writers from being cut out of their own work. I built disclosure templates that forced conflicts into daylight instead of burying them in footnotes. I set up a public archive where corrections would live permanently, not quietly disappear. The work felt clean, not righteous. Clean. Around 10 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I considered letting it go, then answered. "Hannah," my mother said. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Not fragile, just stripped of control. "I won't ask you to stop," Evelyn Pierce said. "I know that won't work." I didn't respond. "I want you to know," she continued, "that I never meant for you to be hurt." I waited. "You always think intention matters," I said finally. "It doesn't." There was a pause. "I don't recognize the way you're handling this," she said. "I learned from watching you," I replied. Her breath caught slightly. "That's not fair," she said. "No," I agreed. "It's accurate." She didn't argue. "I don't know how to fix this," she said. I was careful with my next words. "Then don't try," I said. "Fixing implies restoration. This isn't about going back." "What is it about?" she asked. "Boundaries," I said. "And consequences." Another silence. "I love you," she said. I believed her. That didn't change anything. "I know," I replied. "Goodbye, Mom." I ended the call before she could respond. I didn't feel relief. I felt closure. Later that night, I wrote a short note to myself and taped it above my desk. You don't owe access to people who only listen when threatened. Saturday morning arrived bright and cold. I went for a long walk, letting the city move around me without needing anything from it. For the first time in weeks, my mind wasn't racing ahead to outcomes or defenses. It stayed where my feet were, on pavement, on breath. The story was no longer unfolding. It had unfolded. What came next would be built, not revealed. And I was ready to build it on my own terms. One chapter remained, not about them, about me. The morning after I spoke to my mother, I woke up before my alarm. Not with urgency, with stillness. That was new. For weeks, my days had started with scanning for damage, anticipating reaction, bracing for escalation. That morning, there was nothing to brace for. The story had landed. The consequences were unfolding. And my role in that part was finished. I made coffee and opened my laptop, not to check the news, but to work. Clear Margin went live. Quietly. No announcement, no launch post, no personal statement. Just a clean website, a mission page, and a single line under editorial principles. Every contributor keeps their name. Every conflict is disclosed. Every correction stays visible. By noon, 2 journalists I respected had already signed contributor agreements. One from Milwaukee, one from Tulsa. Both women, both careful. Both tired of being asked to soften facts to preserve comfort. That felt like the right beginning. At 1 p.m., I received a message from Elaine Foster. "You're seeing it, right?" I knew what she meant. The follow-up coverage had shifted tone again. Less outrage, more explanation. The institutions involved were now framing reforms as proactive rather than reactive. They were rewriting the narrative. I wasn't offended. That's what institutions do when the facts are no longer negotiable. At 2:30, Daniel Ross called one last time that week. "They've stopped pushing," he said. "At least for now." "Good," I replied. "You've crossed the threshold," he said. "You're no longer someone they think they can manage." "That was the goal," I said. He paused. "You know this will follow you," he said, quietly. "In rooms you'll never enter." "I know," I replied. "It already has." "And you're okay with that?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Because it also opens doors I wouldn't have been allowed near before." He laughed softly. "You're right," he said. "It does." That evening, I walked to the river again. Same path, same water, different posture. I thought about the woman I'd been at the beginning of this story. The one who believed that if she followed every rule, disclosed every conflict, stayed polite and precise, she would be protected. She had been wrong, but she hadn't been foolish. She'd been learning. What no one tells you about betrayal, especially the quiet kind that wears professional language and family loyalty, is that it doesn't feel dramatic at first. It feels like being edited out slowly, like losing access to rooms you helped build, like watching your name disappear while your work remains. The moment that changes you isn't the confrontation. It's the decision to stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Over the next few days, Clear Margin received tips, some solid, some shaky, all worth evaluating. I didn't rush. I didn't chase momentum. I built intake processes, verification standards, timelines that allowed facts to breathe. This wasn't about speed. It was about permanence. On Wednesday, I received a handwritten note in the mail. No return address. It read, "I worked under someone like your mother once. I stayed quiet. Thank you for not doing that." I sat with that longer than I expected. Not pride. Responsibility. Thursday afternoon, I ran into a former colleague from the Ledger at a grocery store. He looked uncomfortable. Then, relieved. "You were right," he said quietly. "About the pressure. About how it works." "I know," I replied. "I'm sorry," he added. "I believe you," I said. We stood there for a moment. Two people who had survived the same system in different ways. Then we went our separate directions. That night, I sat at my desk and opened a blank document. Not to write an investigation, not to outline a pitch, just to reflect. I wrote down what this experience had taught me, not as lessons, but as boundaries. I will not trade clarity for belonging. I will not confuse access with trust. I will not stay where my silence is considered a contribution. Those sentences felt final, not defensive. Final. On Sunday evening, I received one last message from my sister, a photo of the mountains outside her new apartment. No caption. I didn't reply with analysis or reassurance. I sent one word: beautiful. That was enough. As I write this now, weeks later, the headlines have moved on. The investigations continue quietly. My family is no longer a daily thought. Not because I don't care, because I no longer live inside their expectations. I didn't win. I chose. And that distinction matters more than people realize. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever been made to feel disposable for telling the truth, or pressured to protect systems that would never protect you, take a moment now. Like the video. Leave a comment if you've recognized yourself somewhere in this. Subscribe if you want more stories about boundaries, dignity, and the kind of justice that arrives without applause. Because sometimes, the most powerful form of revenge isn't exposure, it's refusal. Refusal to be erased. Refusal to be managed. Refusal to live smaller than what you know to be true. That's where my story ends, and where everything else begins.